So the year is 2026. It's rolled around, as years tend to every year. Kind of how time works. And there's this big hullabaloo in the tech space about RAM and the RAM shortage. And there's been a lot of clickbaity videos about it that have kind of led you to believe that it's quite bad. But what these videos and articles tend to forget is that by not publishing or even doing the actual maths around this shortage, they actually missed out on a really clickbaity title. Or a more clickbaity title, because in actuality and all reality, the situation is actually so much worse than any of these articles have, publicly spoken about. And of course, we all know that this is centered around the AI boom. AI data centers and AI processing centers are using more and more of this RAM to the point that it's insatiable at this point. They literally cannot get enough RAM to do what they're trying to do. Supply has been increasing over years for gamers and just regular PC users, but the demand from AI, it literally has no cap. There is no set in stone number of the demand. They are literally taking everything they can get and they still want more. And as we're going to get into, that problem isn't about to get any better. It's actually about to get a whole lot worse. And I'm actually going to break down the numbers on this to give people an idea of just how bad. So, why is this problem even sprouting up right now? Well, as many of you will know, RAM manufacturers such as Crucial have announced that they are no longer going to be supplying RAM to consumers. That's me and you, that's the gamers, that's the game developers. Those are just regular people who maybe buy a set of RAM or a couple of sticks, chuck them in and use them for everyday purposes. Now, you might be thinking, well, why have they stopped selling to us? And it's actually not so much that they've stopped selling the RAM to us, it's that they're actually flat out retooling their production lines in a way that they won't actually be able to anymore. And this is where the problem gets exponentially worse than many of these articles will even lead you on to believe. I would go as far as to say, for the next potentially 5 to 10 years, RAM might actually be non-existent. For me and you. But I'm going to get into exactly why very shortly. So enough talking about things that don't exist, and let's talk about one that absolutely, categorically does. There's a game that just dropped a limited time crossover, and if you miss it, there's no second chance to grab what comes with it. And yeah, it's a big one. Raid Shadow Legends just launched a brand new themed crossover with a legendary gaming franchise. If you download Raid using my link and log in for 7 days, you can take part in this event and unlock an exclusive legendary champion inspired by it. This event is time sensitive, so once it's over, that champion is gone. On top of that, Ultimate Death Knight is back, the actual ultimate one. He's one of the strongest defensive champions in Raid. He redirects single target damage to himself, punishes enemies for healing, shields the entire team, and shuts down enemy legendaries with provokes and debuffs. He's useful pretty much everywhere. PvE, PvP, Arena, and that's why people consider him a must-have. If you haven't started playing yet, then what are you waiting for? Click my link in the description or scan my QR code to get amazing bonuses only available via my link. Instantly unlock a huge starter pack with Legendary Harvest Jack from the Undead Hordes faction. Reach level 15 to get another amazing epic Knight Errant from the Bannerlords faction and other useful things. New players can pick 1 out of 6 promo codes for a free legendary champion of their choice. You can choose between the legendary champions Greenward and Ruark using promo code TREEHUGGER, Alice the Wanderer using promo code GETALICE, the Cheshire Cat using promo code KITTYCUT, Tuhanarak using DESERTQUEEN, Sun Wukong MONKEYKING using MONKEYKING, or my personal favourite Ultimate Death Knight using promo code UDKING. If you're stuck on which champion to choose, I highly recommend using the code UDKING for the Ultimate Death Knight, as he's a pretty well-rounded character across the board. Just make sure you download using my link first, otherwise the bonuses won't activate. Alright, back to the video. So let's get into what you're all actually here for. Let's not bait you any longer. The numbers. The numbers, what do they mean? Well, to put it quite simply, we're all categorically cooked. Because these data centers for AI are, well, let's break down the math, shall we? The current gen AI processing units and GPUs are the H100s by NVIDIA. And fortunately, we can actually break down the chips that are on the RAM, which make the RAM, break them down and see exactly where it's all going and how much. So a single H100 uses enough of these little chips that are on the RAM sticks, which is what makes up the RAM. Remember, the sticks are basically just motherboards that connect into daughter boards that connect into a motherboard, just for compatibility. But the chips that are on them are the actual RAM. And this is where problems start to crop up. A H100 has anywhere between 72 to 144, depending on the numbers that you read online, chips of RAM, or RAM chips, I should say. Now, many data centers are deploying 10,000 of these processing units purely for AI, because AI is an insatiable beast that just wants more and more and more processing power, which means more of these things. The only way they can scale it up is by buying more of them and deploying more of them. And many of these AI data centers are using 10,000 of these for one data center, which is colossal. So 16 gig sticks have 8 of these chips. That is kind of the standard amount that is required for gaming nowadays and most workloads on work PCs. 16 gigs is kind of just the safe amount to go for. So using those prior numbers of how many chips are being used in these individual processing units, and again, I've given a wide range there based on the upper and lower amounts that I've seen online. One data center with 10,000 of these systems deployed is taking away 90,000 to 180,000 16 gig sticks of RAM from consumers. And the scary thing about this is they're not physically taking the RAM sticks that you would put in to your computer. Because I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, well, when this AI boom's over, we'll get all the hand-me-down RAM. No, you won't. It's not that the RAM is being taken from you, it's that they stopped making it. Because the chips that go onto your RAM are far more valuable being soldered into these processing units for these AI chips. Would you rather sell a cookie to someone for $5 or to someone else for $50 and have the knowledge that the person who bought it for $50 will never be able to resell it back to the other people who were looking to buy it? Meaning they're not creating a second-hand market for the gamers. They win on both fronts. And this is why I referred to Crucial, basically discontinuing the sale of RAM to consumers. It's not because they don't want to hand the sticks over to you, it's because they don't exist. Crucial has been in the process of retooling all of their production lines that were making consumer RAM to making RAM on chip. Essentially making the RAM chips to fit and to be soldered to these AI processing units. The RAM that you're missing and can't get your hands on just doesn't exist. It's not leaving the production line. The production line has changed. And this causes a real big problem. Because all of these industries, especially the RAM industry, just like all of the tech industries, are led by corporate overlords and investors, they follow the money. And again, the cookie analogy, why sell it to you for $5 when someone else is willing to pay $50 bare minimum? Potentially even more. And as demand rises, which, as I say, demand is currently non-calculatable, it's exponential, there is no end in sight, they are never going to catch up production to be able to fulfill that demand for AI and then think, well, we'll now also start serving the consumers. That's not going to happen. And to clarify, other RAM manufacturers will probably be soon to follow suit, because the amount of profitability there, whether it be short-term or long-term, if the AI bubble bursts in 2027, the profit they will have made by throwing away their customer base of just consumers, they'll have made up for it with the AI crowd tenfold. So don't be surprised if production gets even lower from the other 2 manufacturers that are currently making RAM. Because currently, the main manufacturers are Crucial, Hynix, and Samsung, I believe. Last time I checked, those were the top 3 by a country mile. If the other 2 start switching this up, we're going to be headed for an absolute turnaround with RAM. But just to cement this idea that this is going to get a whole lot worse before it even maybe ever gets better, if it does, based on planning permission and current construction that has already started, the number of data centers worldwide is set to increase from 6,100 calculated at the end of 2025 to 8,400 by 2030. 5 years, and we're going to be going up 20%. We're going to be going up roughly 20% of the global capacity of data centers with AI being the main factor in this growth. That is 2,300 more data centers. And if we assume the average that I used earlier for data center capacity of around 10,000 of these units, let's do the maths on that. So if we take the low estimate from earlier of how many of these chips are actually used in these AI processing units of 90,000 sticks worth of 16 gig RAM per data center, and we times that, this is going to sound unbelievable. But if you times that by 2,300, the amount of data centers that are going to be built, 2,300, if you times it by that, you come out at 207 million sticks of 16 gig RAM. That is how many, when you take into account the amount of chips that are going to be allocated, that is how many sticks of RAM worth of chips will be used. And if that sounds crazy to you, it's potentially going to get even crazier than that. Because something we're not considering is the fact that AI hardware currently has a lifespan of about 2 years before something brand new comes out. And with Nvidia's new hardware that's estimated to be anywhere between 30 and 60% more powerful than the current gen, data centers are going to throw away all their old hardware to make room for all this new, more dense, compact hardware that is performing better on a better power budget and generally just being able to be cooled easier because of the new form factor. And if you think they're going to replace 10,000 units with 10,000 units, you're wrong once again. Because tech density, or compute density, is the biggest factor. They've already bought the infrastructure and installed it all to power that much processing in their warehouses. They bought the whole speedometer, they're going to use the whole speedometer, which means they're not just going to replace 10,000 with 10,000 of the new things. They're probably going to be upping it based on how much they can physically fit in there on the power budget. So let's say it's a 30% saving on power used on these new units. They're going to ram 30% more in there because they can. Because as I've said, the amount of processing power that they are trying to gobble up from everywhere else, it's not satiable. It's just not. And many people don't understand that this doesn't just affect sticks of RAM that you buy. Every device that you have that has some sort of processing capability, be it your PC, your laptop, your mobile phone, your smartwatch, they all have some amount of these chips in them. And to show that this has already had a knock-on effect that's potentially going to get a whole lot, well, I say potentially, I'm very confident saying it is going to get much worse over the next 5 years. Current existing RAM has skyrocketed by around 250 to 500% in a matter of months. Laptops have been hit the hardest by this because an increase of 250 to 500% quite often means hundreds of dollars added onto the price to produce that laptop. And then the manufacturers need to add a margin on top for profit, obviously, because they're not going to eat the loss on the RAM price increase. Well, it gets worse, because the stores that are buying these laptops to sell them, as an example, a couple of days ago, I went into, we have a PC store in the UK called Currys. I don't know where else they are globally, if they even are. And I went in to get a new smartwatch because my old one broke. And their laptop department was an absolute graveyard. Their display laptops all had out of stock signs, and many of them had even had the prices removed from them. And that's apparently because they don't plan to get any more into stock, because their warehouse, as I asked, doesn't stock a great deal of high-value products because they've never needed to. So when even the tech stores aren't selling them because it is so volatile that they don't know if the price that they have online is even the price they're going to be able to get them in for, you've got a big problem there. Samsung has already announced as well that they may have to up or readjust the prices of some of their smartphones because, plain and simply, they also use RAM. And now that most modern smartphones do come with 16 gigs of RAM or even more, you can only imagine the increase in price that is going to cause on new phones. And not even new phones, current gen and last gen phones that are still being made. In fact, I think this is going to quite simply just lead to, well, to them just dropping older models of phone. Because again, the price increase will mean consumers will not even consider buying them. Because the price margin between the last gen phones and the new gen phones is going to be shrinking to the point that it's a no-brainer that you would never buy the older phone. So why bother producing it? And it doesn't just stop there, because as I pointed out earlier in the video, GPUs also use RAM. Like, not use the RAM in your computer, they have dedicated RAM chips soldered on to the card, in a very similar fashion to how this is happening with the AI chips. Well, guess what? Nvidia is in the market of making these AI compute units. They are the ones making them. Where do you think they are going to prioritize allocating those chips? Consumers? No. Why would they? They don't care. Which has also led to, obviously, the second-hand GPU market going AWOL again, very similar to how it did quite a few years back in the mining craze, where everyone was mining on GPUs. The only saving grace there is that eventually, when the miners upgraded, all that old hardware came trickling back down to us if we didn't mind having last-gen tech. We don't have that happen this time, because the cards aren't being made. And if they are being made, I can tell you now they are going to be priced so absurdly for the next gen, or so underserved with the amount of memory on the next gen cards, that it's going to have feathers flying from the consumers. It will. Now, something else I've been told by friends of mine that work in the automotive industry is that many companies are already trying to come up with a contingency plan, because many of the consoles that go into cars, newer cars like Fords, Jaguars, Land Rovers, BMWs, they all use RAM. That again are soldered onto the boards inside, same way as they are in smartphones. And these companies usually buy millions of units all at once, so that if there is ever a supply chain issue or a bit of a hiccup, they can kind of ride through it and it won't affect them. Well, apparently, and again, I can't verify this, but it reasons to believe that this is actually what's happening, because logic, many of the suppliers aren't willing to re-sign an early allotment of the stuff that goes into making these consoles, purely because they can't guarantee that they're even going to be able to get these RAM chips to make it, let alone at a price that's even, feasible. So just being completely real with you guys, I know it's a very doomer video, and it's kind of taking an already annoying topic of, oh my god, I can't find a RAM kit that's worth anything. And in a few years' time, it might be like Fallout, but instead of trading bottle caps and whatnot, we're literally using RAM sticks as currency. But this is kind of the harsh reality of this, which is when you actually do the maths, and again, the maths that I've done is very conservative. The numbers don't sound feasible. It sounds like just made up Looney Tunes numbers. But the maths doesn't lie. Even if you go like 40% more conservative than that on the numbers, it's horrifying. If the problem was only 10% of what it is, long term over the next 5 years, it's good for nobody. Nobody wins here. But ladies and gents, I'm sure we're going to see this play out over the next 5 years, and who knows, if I ever need to upgrade my editing PC, you may never see me again, because if I can't get the RAM, I can't get the RAM news to you, due to the ramifications. But anyway, ladies and gents, as always, a massive thank you to the patrons. I hope you guys are having a fantastic week and a great new year, and I'll catch you in the next one. A massive thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring today's video. Check it out by scanning the QR code on screen or using the link in the description.